Wonderful. Thank you all so much for coming this evening. I believe many have come from quite a distance to be here, so thank you very much for your energy, including our wonderful guests that on a whirlwind tour have landed down under, and it's just amazing to have everyone here. Named is Nara, my wife, and we represent Ananda's Sangha Australia. It's very exciting. Ananda is a worldwide movement spreading the teachings of Yogananda. Many of you may know as the author of Autobiography of a Yogi. It's such a joy to be in service of this great master.
And as you all also know, tonight's topic is on Kriya Yoga. From Autobiography of a Yogi, we learn about this ancient technique of meditation. And also, we're going to learn tonight about how it can be the solution for the times that we're living in, and how we can use this path of spirituality to help us uplift our consciousness and ultimately be free from this mess that we're all living in and that we aspire to get out of. And so we're very, very, very grateful to have our dear guest, Asha Nayaswami, who not only comes from California and is in the middle of a global tour. She's been all over the world speaking about these teachings of Yogananda, but she's also lived and worked closely with Swami Kriyananda, who was the direct disciple of Yogananda. And so she's really a wonderful light sharing this joy of this path, but these teachings in a way that bring together the East and the West and make it something that we can all take home and bring into our daily life and see positive changes. So thank you, Asha, and for being here, and we're so grateful to have you.
With housekeeping, if people aren't aware, there are bathrooms that end of the building, and this end of the building they are outside. As you'll soon learn, Asha is full of energy and life, has a very soft, beautiful voice, and so while everyone's here, just a reminder about turning off mobile phones. And the second thing is just let's honour Asha by really being attentive and tuning in for the message that Asha is bringing. It's such a wonderful gift to hear as well. We also have Dambara, and Dambara is been part of many communities of Ananda around the world, and one of the amazing founders of Ananda, Swami Kriyananda, people always say, if you want to know Ananda, attune to the music. And we have a beautiful opportunity for Dambara, who attunes to this music, and so we're going to share that music and joy with you this evening as well. So thank you. And we do have a team in the background that you don't see. Wonderful Sabre team that has been here this evening and working hard. And
Thank you. I've had a little sniffle, so they're setting me up in case I sniffle, but I hope that I won't. Thank you very much for your kind words, and I hope I don't disappoint. We shall see. It has been, as they mentioned, my very, very good karma. That's the only word I can think of to use it. To have been drawn to the spiritual path at a very young age, to find where I belong. When I met Swami Kriyananda when I was just 22 years old, that was 1969. More than 50 years. I was born for this life, and I just never looked back. I was desperately seeking something meaningful to do with my life, and he personified for me what I wanted to become. That was the best way I could think of saying it. It was the first grown-up. I suppose at 22 you're supposed to be grown-up, but I didn't feel like one then, and I scarcely.
Father, now the I wonder with thee, flowers and fields are alive with thy joy. All that I owned to thee I've given, now I sing and I love, I am free. Father, now that I dance in thy name, birds and animals share in my song. All my sorrows, all my merriment, join in music to set hearts aflame. Father, now that I wander with thee, flowers and fields are alive with thy joy. All that I owned to thee I've given, now I sing and I love, I am free. Father, now that I dance in thy name, birds and animals share in my song. All my sorrows, all my merriment, join in music to set hearts aflame. All my sorrows, all my merriment, join in music to set hearts aflame. Okay, now the next one, thank you. It's okay to clap, go ahead. Okay, you get to listen to the next one too, but you also get to sing along with us. Just simple, amen, amen, at the end of each verse, okay? It's called Peace. Peace gave us the mountains, peace gave us the sky. Nightly when starlight enfolds us, peace is its lullaby. Amen. Amen. Peace gave us the morning, peace gave us the sun, bird songs that call us to welcome day and fresh labors begun. Amen. Amen. Peace gave us the seasons, peace gave us the rain, cool clouds that gather to bless us, mist hands that soothe away pain. Amen. Amen. Peace gave us our hearts long. Amen. Amen. Thank you.
Oh, I better stand in front of it, yeah. Okay. Is that good? If it's not too high. Can it be a little bit low? Because naturally I would. We share a language and share an energy. And during the course of the last 35 or 40 years, Swami Kriyananda often talked about the dynamic energy of Australia and how perfectly it was suited for Yogananda's teachings. And he very much wanted to carry his guru's work here. An effort was made to start an Ananda community in the 90s, but it just somehow, it never took hold. It didn't take hold sufficiently to endure. In 2012, which was actually the last 12-month cycle of Swami Kriyananda's life, he died in 2013, at that point I had been, 25 years in the Silicon Valley, where I still live, which is Palo Alto, California, where I was one of the founding members of an Ananda community there, after having helped found a rural community, which is called Ananda Village, earlier than that. And he said to me, basically, I'd like you to relinquish all your responsibilities and travel as much as you can. And he said the very interesting phrase, "You were born for this," but I knew exactly what he meant. I meant it was from my various earliest memories were of two realities. One was I had this overwhelming desire to be happy, to have something that I had, because I was very well brought up. I was very, very comfortable and had a lovely family and all of those things. But I had this feeling that the project of being a human being was to try to figure out how to be happy. And as I got more sophisticated, I understood what the intuition was, which is that so many things in life turn out differently than we hope, and change is completely unavoidable. And if we're not prepared, all of this can just knock us off our pins. And somehow I just knew that. Later, when I said to Swami, when I met Swamiji later and was talking, and I said, it was so peculiar because I was avid for happiness and yet I always had it. And he said, in the context of what we're teaching here, in past lives, none of us are born as a clean slate. This is a tradition that's so well known now, the idea of reincarnation. It's not startling to say it, partly because cultures have shifted and times have changed. But when we think of the life that we're living now as just one chapter of a very long book, then many things that are otherwise inexplicable become quite sensible. And I feel, and people use the phrase old soul or something like that. I don't know what those words really mean, but it means that you understand that there's something much deeper happening in this world, and that it isn't just about getting my own little story organized, getting myself really secure, and then just hanging on till it's over, that something else is here. When I was 10 years old, living with my parents, of course, we had a house with a big picture window. I was living in the state of Texas in the US at that time. And there was this man, and he was catty corner over there, and he was mowing his lawn. One of the neighbors was mowing his lawn. And I remember at the age of 10, staring out that window with this feeling that if I stared hard enough and concentrated deeply enough, that some kind of a superficial layer of this world would part, and I would actually see a deeper reality. And so that face of that neighbor and his mower, his lawnmower, is just emblazoned in my consciousness. He was going to be my doorway to enlightenment, I guess. There was nothing in my context that would even use the word enlightenment, but we're all much wiser sometimes than we're able to say. We just have something calling us, don't we? And eventually, when I read Yogananda's teachings, at first, the autobiography, which is, of course, one of the most influential spiritual books in the world, almost anyone who moves even a little bit out of the ordinary box reads Autobiography of a Yogi. He just somehow has that power, even if a person doesn't ever do anything with it. In the course of my travels, of course, I meet people and they say, "Oh yes, of course I read it. It catalyzed me for this," or whatever it might be. When I read it at first, I didn't like it. I wasn't able to just grasp it in a moment. It was all full of miracles. And it was on page 9. On page 9, this guru materializes in a wheat field to correct, some mistake. It's like, oh no, I'm really not for that. And I just put it down. I was a very rational, intellectual person. I wasn't looking for God. I wasn't looking for spirituality. I was looking for happiness. But somewhere in there, I got the phrase from Yogananda, and the phrase was, a portable paradise. English was not his first language, he was a Bengali, but he was marvelous at word phrases. I'm a writer and a speaker, so I love words. I especially love little nuances of words. So a portable paradise. We carry within us, he said, a portable paradise. And somehow, all this great philosophy and everything, that was the phrase I grabbed. It just was so vivid that what I was looking for was actually already inside of me. But I sure didn't know where to find it. It was a nice philosophical idea, but what would it mean? And then Swami Kriyananda walked into a room. It was a room a little smaller than this one, or maybe close to it. And by that point, I was reading. I was reading books about spirituality. I wasn't attuned to these masters, but I was attuned to the idea. I was tuned to the idea that there was such a thing as meditation, and that there was this portable paradise inside of us, that we were always it was so close to us, but we were always kind of looking in the wrong direction. It's the only way I can think about it. Always trying to make it from out there. A friend of mine, when his first child was born, beautiful girl, I was going to say little girl, but she's a grown woman now. But of course she started small. We all start small. And they invited me to, it was a hospital birth, but informal. So they invited me to be there when she was born. And she had a little bit of distress in her first moments of life. So the nurses picked her up and carried her off to somewhere else to make sure she was okay. Papa followed, and he followed right behind. He's a great big Irish tenor with a real big heart. And in a matter of a minute or two, it was clear the baby was fine. And he's leaning over this little baby, gorgeous baby, his firstborn. He's absolutely, she knew. She wrapped him around she wrapped him around her little finger. Is that how it goes? In the first 90 seconds. And he was just happy to be wrapped. And so he's there with her, and I'm watching, and it's so moving. I'm crying like this. She reaches up her tiny little hand, and she just grabs him like that, grabs his hand like that. And his hand was very big, and hers was very small. Oh, it's so beautiful. At the same time, I thought, oh my gosh, she's 2 minutes old. And what is the first thing she does? She reaches out for comfort. She tries to find what's going on here and what can I take, what can I have. Now, for a baby to love its father that's the way we're made. There's nothing that inherently is not appropriate about that. So on one hand, I was so thrilled by it, and on the other hand, I was so dismayed. How many lifetimes does it take for us to just keep trying? Yogananda said something quite chilling, actually. He said, what compels us to reincarnate again and again is that life almost works. That's how he puts it. If it was a complete catastrophe, we'd just write it off. But it's always really close. It's just almost. Like if only I hadn't gone into banking, but I'd followed my heart to be a painter, then it would have been right. If only we'd stopped at 3 children instead of having 5, because the last one was a lemon, whatever it might be. If only I'd married her sister instead of her, then it would have been better. You can see. If I'd lived in the mountains instead of the sea, if I had been in a country where the economics were better, whatever it might be. So then we tinker. We tinker just a little bit. We go to the astral world, we think about it, we decide, we watch the different planets where we might incarnate, and then all of a sudden our karma just draws us to one, and we try to make it a little better. But at a certain point, Yogananda again, with his marvelous wordsmithing, he says the whole experience, the word he uses is anguishing monotony. Once again, the word monotony of all things, that it just becomes so familiar and that we can predict where this is going. But this is in some weird way that I can't possibly comprehend. This is just the way that God wants it to be for us. We have to understand for ourselves. Nobody can tell you. We all just learn from experience. It's just as simple as that. I remember I had this little satchel that I used, and I was borrowing someone's car to take a little trip, and I set the satchel right on the hood of the car, and the owner of the car said, "Don't do that because the rivets at the bottom of the satchel will scratch the hood of the car." So I, picked it off and put it on the ground. Later on, I'm visiting my friends. I put the satchel on the car, and now it's filled, and I pull it off, and lo and behold, I scratched the hood of the car, But it epitomized to me. Nobody believes anything until you have your own experience. And it was like, by Jove, it does, So everybody can tell us, this is what you need to do, that's what you need to do. But it's only when we actually use our free will to grasp it, to hold it. And now the other side of that is, it's not as if there's nothing beautiful about this world. There's this great mistake that we sometimes get, and sometimes we grab it the wrong way. Desire is our great enemy. You shouldn't want anything in this world. You should just be within yourself. Don't enjoy anything. That's at least for me, that's even worse than Lahiri Mahashaya appearing in the wheat field on page 9. I want to be happy. I want to be happy every day. I want to be finding that which fulfills us is what we really want. So what we're really trying to learn, and this is what Yogananda's message is to the world, it's the opposite of nothing is spiritual. The actual teaching is everything is spiritual. Everything that we experience. I mean, what else would it be? If the divine exists anywhere, the divine has to exist everywhere. It can't be like this little corner of the universe was made by God and the rest of it was, it was manufactured by Google. I mean, where did it come from? It has to be one reality. So what happens to us over these many lifetimes of experience, it's not only that we're disappointed, which we are, but we're also fulfilled. And Swami Kriyananda put it so thoughtfully by saying just simply this: we learn a certain amount from being disappointed, from having our desires thwarted or our fulfillments denied. We learn a certain amount because we have to soldier on, and we discover that even though it didn't quite come out, I can still find something good. But in terms of real wisdom, and especially in terms of freedom, especially in terms of our portable paradise, we learn much more from having our desires fulfilled. Our desire for human love, for family, for security, for home, all the natural things that we want. Because when we drink the cup of whatever it is that we believe will make us happy, when we get ourselves organized enough and have enough good karma that it really comes to us, and we drink that cup to the bottom, then we realize that was beautiful, but it wasn't quite enough. Because the nature of this world is it's ephemeral. It's just coming and going, and we were made for eternity. We were made for that which never changes. So human love is lovely. The beauty of this world is exquisite. Art is very satisfying. All of these things. But what we gradually begin to understand is all I'm ever experiencing is my own consciousness. And at first, that's rather a terrifying thought, because we just begin to realize that It's all within me. And how I live it, how I perceive it, how I embrace it, that's all I ever experience. Speaking of past lives, I think I have had so many existential crises over this. The sort of like the fields of mental imbalance are rather familiar to me. I actually remember at one of these points before I met Swamiji, just before I met him, that point I was living in San Francisco and I had an apartment that it was in the back of the building and it faced out on this little garden. And by that point I had begun to understand that there was a pathway that I could follow, but I couldn't figure out how to follow it. I just knew it existed, but I was getting up and I was going to work every day. I was coming home, I was spending time with my nice friends, I was going to sleep, I was getting up, I was going to work the next day. I was all of 21 years old, but the anguishing monotony of it, I think it was coming. So I remember standing at the window. These are like, at 10, I'm looking at the neighbor mowing his lawn. At 21, I'm looking at this little back garden in San Francisco. And I'm thinking, I think I'll have a nervous breakdown. It just sort of like crossed my mind because the existential emptiness of it was really overwhelming me. And then this whole thing played out in my head. Oh well, if I have a nervous breakdown, it'll create a commotion and my friends will come over and they'll be very nice, but they won't be able to help me. And then eventually they'll take me to the psychiatric ward and I'll check in there and I'll stay there for a few weeks or a few months and I'll meet some psychiatrists and we'll have group sessions and they'll all help me and they'll give me drugs and, then pretty soon I'll be stable enough and they'll bring me out, my friends will bring me home and I'll be standing at this window. And I'll have spent a lot of money and a lot of energy and a lot of time to make a giant circle right here. Because sooner or later, we have to actually just gather our courage and decide, I really am going to do something about this. I'm not just going to read or think, I'm going to really do something about this. And always, always, when the devotee is ready, the key comes into your life. And it just does, because that's part of how the divine has set this world up for us, that we really are not alone. And all of our prayers are answered, even if they're not always answered in the way that we pray them. We pray them with the end point. I'm praying for this and this is how you're going to give it to me. That's not always answered. But the truest, deepest longing of our heart, we were meant for fulfillment. Swamiji was speaking about human love in this case. He was talking about the deep desire. He said the deepest desire in the human heart, he said we long to be loved. He said not merely impersonally by God, but deeply personally by one other person. It's just where we're made. And then so sweetly Swami said, God would not plant that desire in our hearts if He didn't intend to fulfill it. Which is a beautiful way that we can rise to understand. Swamiji and Master often talk, Master is how I call Yogananda, he often talked about God not in the masculine but in the feminine. Not as a pronoun, but as Divine Mother. And one of the messages that Yogananda brought, which is one of the messages of Kriya Yoga, which is what we're coming to right now, is that, the image of the mother, and this is not about gender politics. Gender politics is like the basest manifestation of this different kind of energy, which is we are moving now into a completely new understanding of who we are and what our society is and how we should live. It's pretty easy to see that the world is pretty chaotic. And a lot of people are highly motivated by this moving energy of generosity, of unity, of respect, and motivated by the loving spirit. And for some of us, we just look at the way people are living and we think, this is really crazy. as I say, I live in Silicon Valley where there's so much money and there's so much frantic energy pursuing the money, and the children are so pressured. There was a woman, we have a school, Yogananda created an educational system in Palo Alto, right, actually almost literally across from Stanford University. We run this small elementary school. And this woman felt intuitively that she should put her 5-year-old into our kindergarten. And at that time I was serving as the admissions director of our little school. That's a big title for a little job, but that's what I was doing. So I was helping her to make that decision. She really felt her little child, Emma, belonged with us. And I felt she did too. But the woman, literally, she put her arms around me and she cried on my shoulder for fear that if she put her darling child, which and she was, a darling child, into our rather unusual kindergarten, that it would hurt Emma's chances of getting into Harvard. Oh my, you know. And it was real to her mother, so I couldn't say what I might have said. So I just comforted her and assured her that, you know, there was lots of time between the age of 5 and when she had to apply to Harvard. She could see it coming, you know, like that. But that's the world that I live in there, where there's just this. And why? Is it making anyone happy? And so there's a whole lot of us who really know that something else completely is what's trying to happen. And there's, in Autobiography of a Yogi and in many prophets and saints, they all tell us the times are a-changing. I mean, Dylan started that decades ago, and it's even more true now. There's just this extraordinary tension that's happening. And the way Kriyananda described it, which is consistent with all of this, literally the planet is going through an evolutionary period where the base level of awareness is rising. This is an ancient tradition that's just acting itself out now. Has to do with our position in relation to the center of the galaxy. It's all very fascinating, but we don't have to have any of that to just see it happening. This tremendous energy is coming into the world. We see it in technology. The technology that has swept the planet has just made everything different. I'm right here, I'm standing in front of you and I'm talking. Over there, this is being streamed and who knows who's watching it. Just somewhere we sent the sort of, you know, that random message out to the world. And so people are sitting somewhere. I'll look at you. Belgrade? Yeah. Okay. My friends in Serbia apparently heard about this. Hello, Narayan. Hello, Mukti. Yeah. Our friends in Serbia are watching this just right now. I mean, now on one hand, isn't that marvelous? And on the other, how incredibly destabilizing that is, isn't it? Because nobody can control it anymore. We can't just set up our little system in the USA, which the politics are don't even think about it. And I was charmed by this wonderful journalistic thing talking about white Christian nationalism. And then they were doing all these statistics that I don't think it's quite tipped, but there's more brown and black Christians in the USA now than there are white Christians. But the white Christian nationalists, and they use the name of Jesus, but I'm not sure Jesus is super pleased with it. But meaning, we want it to stay the way it always was. And it used to be that you could just make a box around your little group and you could just hold it. Because, you know, people in Serbia just couldn't be in the same room with you. And so you could make your little box and hold it. But it's just gone. It's just gone. Literally, when the US was bombing whoever we were bombing at that point, I think it was Yugoslavia a few years ago, there were children talking to each other on the email while the bombs are dropping. And you can't sustain that because they know each other's humanity. So there's this tremendous force that's coming in, and many of us, and I've traveled around and met a lot of people now, many of us understand what this new energy is about. It's a global society. And it's just common sense. We're here to help each other. That's all. The first time I went to India in 1986, First time I'd been outside of the Western world, so to speak, and I saw, people living on the street and things that I never saw where I was living. And I just realized, just looking out the window of the bus, we have all the money, we have all the technology. In order to make this a paradise on earth, what we don't have is the will to do it. It's just as simple as that. And then I realized at that point, and I was already deeply into what I'm doing standing right here, which is telling people, go within, seek the portable paradise, learn to meditate, take your fate into your own hands and make it a beautiful one. I'm the most politically active person I know, in many ways, because until we change our consciousness, until we open our hearts to what is really happening in this world, we will always be in a mess. Now, many saints and prophets, including Yogananda, talked about the time that we're in right now, when there would be this conflict between those who are trying to keep it like it was and those who are recognizing that we have to go forward to a new reality. Right now, all the media attention, all the entertainment business, all of those outlets, and unfortunately a lot of money, a lot of power, and a lot of nuclear weapons are in the hands of people who want to go backwards. But what I've really come to understand is all of us who are the future, we're actually very, very well organized, even though we're not organized at all, because we are on one wavelength. And in Autobiography of a Yogi, Yogananda has a paragraph in that book which is so interesting. He speaks of Jesus and Babaji. Babaji, for those of you who don't know, he's what's known as an immortal in the Indian tradition, Amar, meaning ever living. He's a yogi who's mastered life and death, and even as we speak, Babaji lives as Yogananda writes it, lives with a group of very advanced disciples in the Himalayas, and is in constant communion with the other masters, including Christ. These are things that are written in Yogananda's book. I've come to believe it, but there it is. Jesus and Master together, and Babaji together, as he writes it, have planned the spiritual salvation of this age. We think this world is run by politicians, but thank you God, it is not. They are just acting as instruments for cosmic energy. They're carrying out the karma of the planet, but they're not creating it. There is a divine force that is moving us. You can see it's inevitable. No human being could make any of this happen. No personal ego could do this. And these masters are working out our destiny as individuals, our destiny as nations, our destiny as a planet. And Jesus and Babaji have planned the spiritual salvation of this age. They're very concerned, he writes, about suicidal wars and race hatred and religious bigotry and excessive materialism. That about sums it up, doesn't it? But they have planted within the hearts of many souls, and many of us came here for this reason, this belief that our destiny is in our own hands and we can make of our own consciousness, and then after our own consciousness, we can influence. And that's what Kriya Yoga is. Kriya Yoga is a specific meditation technique, but it's not original. He didn't invent it. The word Kriya means action. And many, many masters refer to their practices as Kriyas, because what it is, I will take a specific action that will affect my consciousness. I will discover what my inner anatomy is, not merely what my senses tell me that I want, but what is it that my inner soul, my higher self, where will real fulfillment come from, and what can I do about it? And this is why people meditate. This is why meditation is becoming like, I started this more than 50 years ago, and we were lunatic fringe with capital letters at that point. When you sat down and just shut your eyes and just did nothing, you were crazy. You know? Now everybody knows about meditation, and your doctor will tell you to meditate, you know, for just your heart condition or your high blood pressure. And where I live, not everybody meditates, but those who don't feel guilty. which is a huge step forward as far as I'm concerned. And national media and international movies can make jokes about meditation, and everybody gets the joke. You see what a change that is? If you can actually make humor about something, that means that people understand it from all the different angles. And so they can tell this is a joke. And to me, that's like, wow, hallelujah, look what's happening. And so the whole idea of Kriya, per se, is in that word action. And what Yogananda was bringing to this world is all this form where we were trapped, where we started, and other people control our destiny. You have to be part of this church. You have to follow this dogma. You have to have this priest. You have to hire this pujari to do this ceremony. Otherwise, you won't get into heaven. Yogananda, quite simply, he made the most remarkable statement. The only place that God can be experienced, he said, is in the human nervous system. I always find that phrase, as a wordsmith, a little jarring. The only place that God can be experienced. You expect some more beautiful phrase at the end of that than human nervous system. But it's true. The human body, and according to the ancient teachings, is the most advanced. And this is the question of, the whales are nicer and the dolphins are sweeter. What makes us so great? We're not so great because we're so nice. Some are, some aren't. What makes the human body valuable is that it's sophisticated. And it's sophisticated sufficiently that when we cooperate with the way we're actually made, that we can have profound, superconscious experiences of a reality much greater than this one. That's what I was trying to do, staring at the neighbor mowing his lawn. I was trying to discover Kriya Yoga. I just was too little and too dumb, to be able to have it at that point. But I could feel that there was a level that was just that close. And so what Kriya says is, here's a key. You don't need to join anything. You don't need to depend on anyone. Your fate is in your own hands. This is the portable paradise. This is the kindness of it. But it comes with more. Now, on one hand, you see, if that's too much emphasized, then the ego just grabs it again. Now, ego's not a word I like to use, but what I mean is, we have two aspects of the pronoun I. And we use the pronoun I all the time, and what are we actually referring to? And there's the I, which is my individuality, which is identified with all the things that keep me limited and separate. And to a certain extent, of course, we have to identify with it. I need to know which body to feed. I need to know which body to carry around. All these different things. But because, insofar as I identify with this body, I have a history. I have a mother. I have a father. I have certain siblings. I grew up in Texas. I have an American passport. I have an age. I have a face. Every time I look in the mirror, I see the same one. How remarkable. There it is. My friend who was passing away from cancer, very, very conscious passing. She knew it was the end. She was just lying in what was literally her deathbed. A friend of mine was visiting her. She was a yogi. She was a meditator. She said she was lying there and she saw hundreds of faces passing in front of her because she was very close to leaving this world. Hundreds of faces. And she looked at my friend. She said, and every one of them was mine. She said, it's very hard to be nervous about losing this one. I mean, really, isn't that quite something to think about? Every time I look in the mirror, I see this one now because I identify with it. And that's the I. People call that ego, but ego is just the part of you that's identified with the limited part of you because I'm responsible for it. Swami Kriyananda had this wonderful way of saying it. He said, I never identify with Kriyananda. I consider Kriyananda an event for which I am responsible. I've been a person who's organized lots of events over the course of years because living in community, you always have big crowds around. So I know what it is to organize an event. There's a lot of things that you have to be really conscientious about, but you never actually think that it's you. You just know that it's something that you have to take care of, and you have to do it properly. And then the other I is the spiritual eye. There's a pun there. My friend Dambar makes terrible puns continuously, so I have to, yes, I'm sorry. But the other eye is the spiritual eye, here. It's still individuality, but it's I know myself to be a bubble in the great ocean of spirit. And so which one do I define myself by? Most of us constantly define ourselves by our limitation. Just intuitively, we just do that because it's true. But we add to that this limited form exists in this great ocean. This is the portable paradise, which is, this is an event for which I'm responsible, but my life is neither defined nor limited by this little period of time in which I'm existing like this. These are beautiful ideas, but what Kriya talks about, what Yogananda talks about, you can experience it. You can find out that the rivets on the bottom of your satchel will actually scratch the hood of your car. And it's not just that somebody tells you, it's that we have to do the proper experiment. And as I was starting to say, it's a technique that you use that involves the breath, and it's not surprising. People, in our context, you have to prepare, you have to learn certain other things so that Kriya will benefit you. And when you finally learn it, it's not shocking. It's not like, some incredible, stunning thing you never heard of. But what you're also beginning to understand is, why was I born? Who am I? What causes suffering? How do I take my fate into my own hands? And is there anyone in charge? Am I part of a greater reality? And if so, what is that greater reality? So one of the other things that Yogananda brought as part of the Kriya Yoga science, I mentioned, is this idea of Divine Mother, or phrasing it differently, as the divine as mother. And as I was starting to say before, this is not about gender, because everything in this world is dual. I mean, male and female are just one of many. Life and death, youth and old age, sunrise and sunset, day and night, kindness and cruelty, compassion and indifference. Everything is dual. That's one of the things that makes this world so unstable. Even as I was saying earlier, the energy is coming in, the energy is neutral. It just depends entirely on what we do with it. Some people are using it to get more power for themselves, to behave unspeakably toward their fellow men, and to get money and all these awful things, and to create realities that pull everybody down with them. It's awful what they're doing, but they think it's a good idea. And if I told them they shouldn't do it, they wouldn't believe me any more than I believed that man who told me that my satchel would scratch the hood of the car. We get all the opportunity to find out how it works for us, like that. But one of the things that we have to understand now on the deepest level, and this going back again to finally finish it, it's like masculine and feminine are cosmic realities. And we make a mistake when we go through the Bible and start changing the pronouns, because he is a different aspect of the divine than she. He is the very impersonal aspect of it. And there's always the personal and the impersonal. And they're somewhat defined by male and female, but it's the personal and impersonal. It's the yin and the yang, which is a perfect circle. Both are exactly the same, but the circle's not full unless you have both, because that's how reality is fulfilled. So Yogananda talked about Divine Mother, which most interestingly, so did Jesus, even though traditional churches don't remember that, because Jesus talked about the Comforter. Because at the time he was teaching, at the time he was incarnated, God was a harsh, unforgiving judge. And there were hundreds of rules that you had to follow, or else God would, just cast you out. And the Old Testament is pretty gruesome. God does a lot of smiting in the Old Testament. And so, you're always just sort of standing on the edge of whether you're the next smitee in the whole thing. And so Jesus couldn't move it all the way to the mother, so he moved it from the judge to the father, which was a big step at that time. But then Yogananda has come and he's moved it from the father to the mother. But the truth was there. So Jesus brought it in this way. After I am gone, he said, I will send you the Comforter, and the Comforter will teach you many things. I've read those phrases in the Bible over and over. What more beautiful word is there for what we long for from the divine than the word comforter? Just think about that. I have a few vivid childhood memories, and one of them was when I was 7. My parents sent me to sleepaway camp. As it happened, my brother was a little older than I. My mother felt that she sent me to take care of my older brother. She thought I could help him. I was the smallest kid in the camp, and I was cute and I was precocious, so I enjoyed all of that. I was very happy there. I always had this big mouth, so I would have this little body and this big mouth. My mother said I was adorable. Okay, but my mother would think I was adorable, wouldn't she? And children they wove potholders out of stretchy little bands. I've seen that they still do it. You have a little loom and then you weave it. But my little hands were too small, I couldn't do it. So I didn't make any potholders. So then parent weekend came, and I was in this double bunk, and the girl above me, her name was Rainey, I still remember. And Rainey had about 5 potholders on the little nails up there, and I didn't have any. So I took a couple of hers and put them on mine. The children brain, it's like, I'll just take hers and put them on mine. I didn't follow the logical steps that would tell me what would happen, which was Rainey would notice. And that was not a good thing to do. And my parents were exceedingly ethical. And in our family, we didn't have to be afraid to tell the truth, but we always had to tell the truth. So I'm there, and and the girl, Rainey's really upset because I've taken her potholders. And I remember just saying to my mother and my parents, my mom and dad, they fell. They fell. I tried to persuade them that they fell from the upper bunk down to mine. I just kept saying, they fell. They fell. And what was touching to me in memory, it can move me to tears, was that somewhere in there I must have had to acknowledge that I was lying. I'm sure of that. But I don't remember any of that. I remember my mother comforting me. I just remember her picking up my little body and just holding me to her heart and just letting me cry and keep telling her they fell. But, not everyone. I feel very fortunate to have memories like that of my own upbringing. But you see, these are divine realities. What inspires a mother to comfort her child? Where does that reality come from? Yogananda says, thoughts are not individual, they are universal, and we merely tune in. And I was fortunate, and my mother was fortunate to tune into that. But that's the world we actually live in. But we don't find it if we're always reaching out. We have to go and find out of what we're really made. And then we begin to realize all I ever experience is my own consciousness, which at first is very scary. But then we realize, all I ever experience is my own consciousness. And if I learn Kriya, which is an action that will influence my consciousness, just run that for a moment. Think what that means. Then whatever happens in this world, because we cannot control what happens in this world. See, these are stages of personal growth. At first, we get enough power and enough willpower, enough discipline, enough intelligence, and we just try to make the world work for us. And a great deal of well-meaning, but ultimately not necessarily that effective. It's also motivated by compassion and concern for others' suffering, but insofar it's the world needs to be different for me to feel safe. How's that working for us? Because there are just forces beyond us. But if I can learn the doorway to my portable paradise, then what can ever touch me? And then this gives us images like these great saints here. There's a story in Autobiography of a Yogi which is so odd. I contemplated a great deal. And the story goes something like this. There was a criminal that was on the loose, and the local police, this happened like maybe 100 years ago, just because of the context. And the criminal was on the loose, and the police were searching for the criminal. And there was a yogi, because especially some time ago in India, there were lots of yogis who would wander around. So this yogi was just wandering down the street, but he fit the description of the criminal. So the police started pursuing him, and they started telling him, stop, stop, like the cops, in the name of the police, stop. And he just kept walking. And for some reason, this zealous defender of law and order had a machete of some kind, and he hacked at the man. This is how the story is told. It actually sliced his arm off. And the yogi did not even flinch or cry out. He bent over, he picked up his severed arm, he reattached it to his body, because he was the master of this world, reattached it to his body and calmly turned around and said, I'm not the man you're seeking. Just like that. Now, I believe everything that Yogananda wrote in that book is true, no matter whether I can actually understand how it can work. But I think about that particular story a lot, when the tiniest thing happens and I become so agitated about it, constantly reacting, constantly feeling threatened, constantly feeling concerned, always feeling that I have to fight back and make it different. What would it be like? And speaking of all my years of effort, I'm a totally different person than I used to be. I'm not that yogi. Pick up a machete and go at my arm, I'm going to react. But I'm a totally different person than I used to be, because this kind of, you see, once you start, it's not an all or nothing. It's that we gradually begin to understand on deeper and deeper levels who the I really is. And metaphysically speaking, this is the sixth chakra, and the I that's identified with limitation is the medulla. The I that's identified with infinity is the spiritual I. And the whole process of spiritual growth is just to shift that. If I am one with the infinite, what happens to this event certainly matters, and I have a responsibility for it. But what happens to this event does not take away me. It just takes away the event. And how different is that, you see? Kriya is simply that, which is I can take an action to define my own consciousness. A very simple one. It's always with us. It's a portable paradise. Everything about meditation is about the breath. And it's the one thing we always have, isn't it? As long as we're in this event, we're going to breathe. When the baby is first born, everybody's worried until that baby breathes. Some babies breathe immediately, but sometimes there's a pause. My friend's baby had to go away because she wasn't quite breathing right. The first thing that happens is an inhalation. And often the baby cries. Yogananda said, because at that point the baby says, oh my gosh, here I am again. And they must have noticed somewhere along the line, but at that point it's like it's finally done. And what's so magnificent, if you've ever had the privilege of being with someone when they pass, is the last thing that happens is an exhalation. And it's so extraordinary. And here's another just feature for those of you who haven't had this experience. When a person is passing away, if they're passing away slowly, even if they're unconscious, not always, but often, toward the very end, they'll struggle to breathe in. Like this. There'll be just a lot of effort to breathe in. The body's doing this. It's not even so much the spirit, it's just the body breathes in. And then they'll exhale, and often there'll be a pause, then another effort. But if you're ever doing a vigil like this, at a certain point, the struggle becomes to exhale. And when that change happens, the end is very close. You have to call all the family and get everybody right there. Because at first they're trying to stay in the body, and then they're trying to get out of it. I was with my father when he passed away, and he classically went through that. And then that last exhalation came out. And actually what happened to me was, my mother had passed 2 years earlier, and my parents 56 years together. They were very attached to each other, so I'm sure my mother greeted him. Because I felt this joy that just took me out. I was so ecstatic. It was just somehow, his passing was so ecstatic for me. My sister was with me, and we were in a care place, and my father had been very popular there because he was very dear. And so they were all coming, and they were all expressing sympathy like this. And I was laughing and smiling like this. And finally, my sister, who's sometimes quicker on the uptake than I am, she rams me in the ribs like this, because they're crying because he's died, and I'm laughing because he died. She says, just if you can't be more appropriate, just get out of the way. So I kind of went off and sat in a corner because I couldn't stop. I just couldn't stop. And yet we fear that transition, don't we? We're always trying to protect ourselves. But if we know it's just consciousness, if the body passes away, the consciousness just goes on. We have all these near-death experiences to tell us this. All these people coming back. We're here. This is a school. We're just in this school, and we're here to find out what the truth of it is. Where happiness comes from, what causes suffering. And if we get on with it, it's not only that we will change our own experience, but we can influence everyone. One person's consciousness, just think for a moment about your life. I used to work in retail stores when I was in my late teens and 20s because I had no education and no skills. But I could always talk, so I'd go into work in retail. One person who would come into the store and really relate to me as a person, not just as a clerk, changed my whole day. Just one person who looked at me, saw me, responded to me. We must never, ever, ever underestimate our power. Because this world is really consciousness, and the power of the light is the future. The darkness and confusion, even though it's still got a grip, it's the past. And our job is to build that future. And it starts within us. That's why Yogananda brought Kriya. Jesus and Babaji have planned the spiritual salvation of this age. And it's for us to understand our own divinity. And once we understand our divinity, to see it shining in each other's eyes. And then we become the instrument of Divine Mother. We become the comforter. Wouldn't you like that to be how people say when we left this world? Oh yes, I'll miss her friendship, I'll miss his friendship. He was such a comfort to me. Simple words, so beautiful, well worth striving for. So, bless you all. A little music?
Sure. Two songs. I'll ask the choir to come up for the second one. It's by Swami Kriyananda called Song of the Nightingale. Lift this up a little bit. Nightingale, nightingale, sing of joy through the night. Teach my heart to impart everywhere your delight. Sing of moon rays on the rain, sing that love's not in vain. Every grief, every wrong has its ending in song. Nightingale, nightingale, sing of joy through the night.
teach all men how to spin clouds of gloom into light. Without silence, what is song? Without night, where is dawn? Were it not for men's woes, who would smile at a rose? Nightingale, nightingale, sing of joy through the night. Let each tone silence groan, earth and heaven unite. Morning laughter, evening tears, snow and blossoms all fade. Joy must sing in the night to face change unafraid. Nightingale, nightingale, nightingale. Thank you. Okay, choir, come on up. This is kind of a theme song of Ananda called Many Hands Make a Miracle. And it's participatory. So we'll sing, there's 2 verses, we'll sing it through twice. And the first time around you can just listen to us, but the second time we're going to ask you to stand up. And then if you choose, it says let's all join hands together. If you choose, you can join hands with each other. And then at the very end, watch these guys, we'll raise our hands. Okay, but at the very, very end. You think we should get everyone to stand? You think right now? Okay, everybody stand up. But you can wait till the second go through to join hands. Watch them and you'll see when. Many hands make a miracle. Let's all join hands together. Life on earth is so wonderful. When people laugh and dance and struggle as friends, then all their dreams achieve their ends. Many hands make a miracle. People climbing together. Soon we reach to the pinnacle of every mountain peak. We hazard as one. We lift our hands to welcome the sun. Many hands make a miracle. Let's all join hands together. Life on earth is so wonderful. When people laugh and dance and struggle as friends, then all their dreams achieve their ends. Many hands make a miracle. People climbing together. Soon we reach to the pinnacle of every mountain peak. We hazard as one. We lift our hands to welcome the sun. Okay, third time. Many hands make a miracle. Let's all join hands together. Life on earth is so wonderful. When people laugh and dance and struggle as friends, then all their dreams achieve their ends. Many hands make a miracle. People climbing together. Soon we reach to the pinnacle of every mountain peak. We hazard as one. We lift our hands to welcome the sun. We lift our hands to welcome the sun. Okay, very good. Thank you. You want to do any Q&A or anything like that? You want to do any Q&A or? Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Time flies.
For coming and bringing your energy. we have Super Sharp, so it'll be wonderful to just get to know you all, and we'll be around and come and chat and mingle and share each other's energy for a little while. I think the team are bringing some little snacks down. So thank you all for coming. Thank you for your energy. We'll be around. Love to answer any questions and have a little chat. Enjoy. Thank you.